Many entrepreneurs start their companies by doing what needs to be done. They sell, they manage, they solve problems, they chase opportunities, and they keep the business moving forward. But at some point, that same effort can become the obstacle. If the founder is still the company's best salesperson, if every important customer relationship depends on one person, or if the revenue depends more on hustle than process, the business may be growing, but it may not be scalable. Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to The Reluctant Entrepreneur. I'm Mike Conrad. Today's guest is Sean Shannon, founder of Strategic Growth Design. Sean brings more than 3 decades of sales leadership experience to his work with small and medium-sized businesses, helping them build sales systems, improve messaging, develop stronger pipelines, and create more predictable revenue growth. His background includes leadership roles in local broadcasting, where he helped businesses think beyond advertising and focus on sales and marketing strategies that actually produced results. Sean's work centers on a question every entrepreneur eventually has to face. Can this business grow without depending on the founder to personally drive every sale? Well, we'll get to that answer in just a moment when I return. Stick around. Sean Shannon, welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
As am I.
Your business model resonates with me because I was, I could have been your first customer. I was like the poster child of all your customers combined. I was in terms of sales, I was the CMO, chief sales officer, chief whatever. I was the one that shook the trees. I was the one that planted the trees and then shook the trees and then held the baskets underneath to catch the fruit. I did that for a very long time. And I fell into a trap because founders usually are pretty good salespeople, right? Because they have more passion than anybody. They're living, breathing it. The business is flowing through their veins. So we're good at it. So why pay money for someone else to be less good at it, from
Yes.
that early perspective? So I totally see the seduction of that's the last thing you want to replace, right? I can easily replace all the stuff I hate doing, but I kind of like to sell. And I particularly like to sell my stuff. So I can see how that is a very common path for many business owners and founders to not want to let go of.
Yeah, and they've got founders magic, and part of it's and not only do they not want to let it go, they don't know how to let it go.
Yeah, even worse, right? Because
Yes.
they don't even want to know how because they don't want to let go, right? So
Yep.
it's this catch-22. It's definitely a seduction that just holds them onto that role. So before we go down all the human behavior stuff that leads people to not let go, what was your professional path before starting Strategic Growth Design, and where did you or when did you first realize that sales leadership was going to become your primary, basically your primary lane?
So it goes all the way back to college. I graduated with a political science degree, which means that you are either going to law school if you're really smart, or you're going to go into sales and marketing if you're really dumb. And I'm not the smartest guy in the whole world. I just happened into the radio business because a couple of friends of mine had ended up selling local radio and got me my first interviews in that industry. So I just fell into it. Spent my first 3-4 years just out pounding the pavement, making cold calls. I mean, this is back in the Stone Ages when we still had yellow pages. And you claimed your leads on a lead board, a cork board off in a corner of the sales pit.
And for the young people that are watching or listening to this, Yellow Pages basically is another word for doorstop today, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. The precursor to Google. So I found success fairly early on by understanding that what I was selling was not necessarily airtime. What I was selling was my understanding of how customers viewed the business from the outside in. And, what it built in me was a desire to help others understand that distinction. I remember reading an article, I think it was in Fast Company or Inc. magazine, an interview with Peter Drucker. And he said that the vast majority of businesses have no idea what their customers are buying. They know what they're selling them, but they have no idea what's motivating the purchase. And that's what sort of keyed for me, this understanding that most business owners have inside-itis. They see the business from the inside looking out. And because they are so consumed by running their business, they never get a chance to get outside the building and look at it from the customer's perspective. And I used to tell my salespeople, we're the honeybees of business. We're the folks that are out seeing 2 dozen clients in a week. And we get a chance to pollinate and cross-pollinate ideas and perspectives for these business owners. That's our great gift to them. It's not selling them an ad campaign. It's cross-pollinating ideas and insights, perspectives that they can't get for themselves. And oh, by the way, we can sell them an ad campaign that's going to help grow their business. But the true value is not in the product you're selling, it's in the way that you're selling it.
Yeah. You spent many years in sales and sales leadership before becoming an entrepreneur yourself. You just talked about selling radio spots and things like that. What finally pushed you to step out on your own? I mean, there is a certain security, or perceived security is maybe a better word, to having someone else worry about having the check be cashable.
Yes.
And there's a certain comfort, and maybe some could even say complacency, because all you have to do is you have one job, just don't get fired, right? Other than that,
exactly
money comes in. Money comes in, and sales is one of those few professions where the people who get paid the least in the world and the most in the world are all salespeople, right? It's a very wide spectrum, and there's really, if you do it right, there's really no ceiling, right? It just depends on what you're selling and how big your customer base is and how good you are. What made you leave the perceived security of kind of a quote unquote 9 to 5 and jump into the cold end of the deep pool of entrepreneurship?
Yeah. I think I'm like a lot of folks that end up starting their own business, which is, I thought about starting my own ad agency at a dozen different moments during the course of my career, because that was sort of the natural next step. Lots of former media reps end up building really media buying firms, but I had no interest in doing that. And so I had this idea in the back of my mind, but I was literally forced to leave the industry I was in because it was declining for the last 15 years I was in it. Traditional media is effectively on its deathbed now. And I spent the last 11 years of my career as a market president. So I had full P&L responsibility for, a group of radio stations, first in Sacramento and then in Atlanta. And I had a $35 million P&L that was shrinking bit by bit every single year. And I spent the vast majority of my time figuring out ways to cut positions and eliminate unnecessary expenses. And I just got to a point where I was what I loved about what I did was I got a chance to be in front of clients, 10, 11, 12 times a week. And I was spending 70% of my time working on operations and programming because that's where all the problems were. And that's not my expertise. It's not what I love doing. And so after 34 years in the business, I said, you know what? It's time. I gotta go do something different. I've got to go, right? And what I loved the most about what I did was building sales organizations, building really high performing sales organizations. And I had developed a methodology of how to build an infrastructure that would support a high performing sales team. And so I thought, well, why don't I go and build those kinds of systems for the small and medium-sized businesses that I was selling ad campaigns to?
Yeah. There's I don't know what the percentages are. I read something quite some time ago about the success rate of talented, successful salespeople going into management. That seems to be the logical choice. Hey, you're really good at this, Sean, so we're going to have you train other people to be really good at this. And the satisfaction level of their job just drops through the floor because they're salesmen, they're saleswomen, they're salespeople. They've got it in their blood. And the moment you take that person out of the car and into the cubicle, there's something lost there, right? It's not a traditional progression up the corporate ladder in terms of success. And I think salespeople are uniquely wired that way. That they love, whether it's the their version of the art of the deal or a Game of Thrones. They love the pursuit. They love the capture. They like to club the customer over the head and drag them back by the hair into their cave and claim a trophy. It could be very tribal, in terms of that. And I'm talking about, classic, stereotypical salespeople. That might be someone selling used cars. It might be, someone selling, phone subscriptions or whatever. But salespeople, I think, are wired differently. And because that tends to be where we fall. I was a salesperson for a long time before I started a company. That was my primary role. People would ask me, "What do you do for a living?" I think, sales, right? That was just easier to say sales, and it was accurate. But it seems to be a catch-all for those who either don't know what we want to do or aren't good at doing anything else. And then it weeds out very quickly, and the good ones really stand out and do quite well. But anyway, what was harder than expected when you moved from helping companies grow from the inside to building your own advisory business? What caught you by surprise besides everything?
Besides everything.
Everything. Narrow it down.
I'll go back to my first job in sales management because I think the experience has been kind of analogous. I wrote a note to each of the 7 salespeople that were my first victims as a sales manager about 4 or 5 years after they had left employ of mine, apologizing to them because everything that made me a great salesperson made me a terrible sales manager. Great salespeople are very self-focused. They are 100% attuned to what is important to them and nobody else counts. They love to have an enormous amount of control, and that's what attracts them to being a salesperson. I get to build my day. I get to decide where I focus my time, and I get to benefit from the fruits of my labor, right? But those are all things that make you a terrible manager because as a manager, you have zero control. You are now dependent on others for your success. And, your attention can no longer be on you and your success. It's on others and their success. And it took me 3 or 4 years to figure that out. That, listen, it used to frustrate me. I would be out on 2 or 3 sales calls. I would come back and all the salespeople that weren't on the calls with me said, "Where were you? What were you doing?" And I thought to myself, you report to me. Why do I have to account for my time to you? And at a moment in time, I just realized they don't work for me. I work for them. My job is not management, it's support, right? Leadership is serving. And so I am there to serve those people. And so as I went to build my practice as a fractional sales leader, I had to once again say, what's important is not my success, it's their success. What's important is not my time frame, it's their time frame. And those that find success in what I do have a give first mentality that says, I will wait for when the time is right for you to engage. And I'm just not going to, there's that old analogy that if you try and push a string, all it does is coil up. But if you pull it, it comes with you. But pulling takes time. Pushing doesn't. Mm-hmm. And so it's been this process over the last couple of years of just saying, all right, I'm just going to pull this person along with me. I may be starving today, but if I can keep their interests ahead of mine, a client that I am ready to go to work for today, I met with yesterday and said, you know what, the cash flow cycles in our business really make it better for us to do it in October. And I said, fantastic, we'll do it in October, right? I am here to serve you. And that's a tough thing when you're starting a business, that I need to play on the rhythms of my clients, not on my own needs.
Yeah, very good. You mentioned that they work for you, not the other way around. So therefore, things don't quite go as expected. Because you mentioned your job is to support them. You're very much analogous to an air traffic controller. Air traffic controllers can tell pilots what to do, but their job is to facilitate the fastest route, the safest route, obstacle avoidance, all that stuff, to make sure they are totally in support of the pilots. And even
Yes.
though from a hierarchy standpoint, they could order a pilot to land. They have power over a pilot, but their job is to support them. And yeah, I think it's very similar. Many entrepreneurs discover that knowing how to do the work and knowing how to build a business around that work are two very different things. Was that true in your world?
Yes, 100%. Right. I knew how to build really high performing sales teams. How to build a business around it, man, that's entirely different. Right. How do I build? And one of the things I think, as being an entrepreneur, and I believe it's very common, is that I go from selling a company, selling a product, to really selling myself. And that's a really hard transition to make, right? I am the product. And after 30 some years, I would tell my salespeople, listen, you're the value creator. You are the point of differentiation for us from every other marketing services company that they're calling on. It's one thing to tell somebody to believe that, it's another to believe it yourself.
Yeah. We can be hard to convince
You
ourselves
can
anyway.
be.
Yeah. Looking back, what early lessons or lesson as a business owner changed the way you now advise other entrepreneurs?
Man, that's a great question. Um, I feel like, I'm little over 2 years into this, so I'm I don't know that I have the perspective yet to provide that kind of advice. But I will say that one of sort of the things that I have seen is that we all know that change is a constant. But what I've noticed over the last couple of years is that the pace of change is accelerating and is going to continue to accelerate. And as I look back in my radio career, I saw 2 or 3 very major disruptions in our value proposition, and I'm seeing the same thing happen in nearly every business that I talk to and work with. Is that what was true yesterday is not true today, in a quicker fashion than it ever has been.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So many founders are still the best salesperson. We talked about that earlier, that, no one sells like the founder. No one sells like the owner of the business. They have so much passion. They know exactly the capabilities of what they're selling. They have a lot of motivation to close that deal, not just to get a commission check, but to keep the company
Yeah.
alive. Why can that be why does that become a problem as the business grows? It is successful. I successfully sold pretty much everything we make for the first several years. What causes that to become a problem later?
Yeah, I think there are really two large things that occur. One is that you plateau. Your revenue plateaus because the owner has reached the maximum amount of their time that they can devote to business development versus running the business. And so, their hours can only produce so much revenue. And when they have hit that point, and if their salespeople aren't out creating business for them, they're unscalable. But the second, and I think more pernicious problem is when it comes time to whatever form of exit that owner wants, it is I'm going to say less saleable, but quite frankly, it's probably an unsaleable business.
Right.
You're going to end up becoming an employee of whoever purchases it if you can find somebody to purchase it. You're going to end up in a 3 or 5 year earnout while they try to capture all of the relationships that you have. And quite frankly, the multiple that you get for your business is going to be stymied because of it.
One of my previous guests gave some advice to me and my audience, which was brilliant. He was an exit strategist kind of person. That was his gig, and he said, from day one, build your business as if you know you're going to sell it. Now his take was, he helps people sell it, but I started thinking of it a little differently. I have I'm enjoying the journey. I've had my business for 34 years. They now pay me to stay away. I'm still the owner 100%, but I'm nothing to do with day to day now. I do other things for the industry kind of at large, which helps my business. But I have no specific exit strategy except to die. My team runs the company. My son-in-law is in there. And so it's kind of a family business, and the legacy will be, it will just pass on to my family. And when my wife and I are both no longer here to spend the money. So I don't have an exit strategy, but building a company with an exit strategy in mind makes it a better company, because in order
100%.
to be exitable, sellable, you have to have things like SOPs, standard operating procedures. You have to be able to have people delegated to run important departments, and you have this hierarchy set up, which makes it more sellable, but more important, it allows me to do what uniquely I'm the best at, and not other things that I could do, but I'm not very good at it, and other people are far better at it. It makes the company more profitable. It makes the company more efficient, more scalable, just by thinking, maybe tomorrow I'm going to sell it. Start cleaning up shop now, before the buyers show up. I think that's a great mentality to have, even if there's absolutely nothing in your near vision, planning on selling the company. It's just a good strategy to have. What are the signs that a company doesn't really have a sales system, but instead is relying on hustle, relationships, or the founder's personal effort? Are there tells there? Can you spot that a mile away?
Absolutely. The first question I ask when I meet with a potential client is I ask them, do you have a documented sales process? And the answer is no. In 90% of the cases, they don't have a documented sales process. And so I'll follow up and say, well, okay, tell me, how do you manage your pipeline? And they'll say, well, I've got a CRM. I said, no. How do you manage your pipeline? How many stages are in your sales process? How long should a client be in each stage of the sales process? And they'll, kind of quizzically say, well, what do you mean by that? So there's a half-life to a sale at every stage of the sales process. When you have a discovery call with a client, there is a limited amount of time when that discovery call is still valid. There are only a few reasons why clients say no to a proposal. Either you didn't diagnose the problem correctly, or what you are asking for, the size of the solution is larger than the size of the problem. But the most pernicious one is where they don't say no. They say, essentially maybe it's that the problem changed between the time that you had the discovery call and when you came back with your solution. There's a new fire on the table. So I asked them, I said, listen, at each stage of your sales process, how long should a client go between when you do the discovery call and you put the presentation in front of them? How long should it take them to give you a yes or no answer when you put the presentation in front of them? What we figured out in the radio business is that it was about 5 business days between presentation and getting yes or no. And if we had not gotten a yes or no by day 5, the chances of that deal closing literally got cut in half. So if it was a 50% chance of closing on day 5, it's 25% on day 6, 12.5 on day 7. We finally just started washing opportunities out of the pipeline, out of our CRM after 10 days. And it was what happened was amazing. Is that suddenly salespeople no longer had these huge pipelines of hopium that they could say, well, I've got $1.5 million of pending business, and you'd say, no, actually, you've got about $100,000 of pending business at about 25% chance of closing. So you really have about $25,000 of revenue coming in next month.
Yeah.
And that reality check then spurs them to go out and say, okay, I got to get my volume up. I've got to go find more new clients. So those are the tells for me when I walk into a client. Do you have a documented sales process? Do you know how to manage your pipeline?
When I was building my business, everything, it's so stressful when you're starting a business, particularly from scratch out of your garage and, financially bootstrapping your business. So lots of things would stress me out. And I would find solace, fake solace, but not real, but I would find some degree of solace in looking at the pipeline. We have these pipeline reports, and they did not automatically degrade with time. When we entered all the data in, we would assign it a probability percentage, right? Or we'd choose from these various categories, from 100% to 10%, and I think there was about 10 or 20% variations. And of course, when you first talk to a customer, the phone rings, the guy's excited, the gal's excited. Gosh, that's an 80%er, and say it was a $100,000 product, it would assign 80% of that, so it would assign $80,000 in projected revenue over a period of time. So we would put in the percentage of the probability percentage of closing the sale, and the expected time. So it acted like a completely fictitious cash flow projection statement, but it made me feel good looking at it. It wasn't real.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, some of it came to be, but even a broken clock is right twice a day. So, there was no degree of accuracy, but it did one thing. It did tell me how many people were engaged with us. And to me, the real value in retrospect, I didn't appreciate it then, was to not tell us what's coming in, but tell us what's going wrong. If we have 100 leads a day and we're closing one, that's 1% closure rate. Something's wrong with our message, something's wrong with our product, something's wrong with our system, our people, something is wrong. And to me, that pipeline report, albeit not accurate financially, was very accurate to illustrate how the fruit is dying on the vine, and we're not really doing anything about it, right? So from that standpoint, it was good.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's a number Sales Acceleration has come up with. 75% of small, medium-sized businesses don't have individual quotas. They have a number for the whole business, but they don't have it assigned by salesperson. And the implication is they therefore have no pipeline management system by the individual. They have one for the company. And, having a pipeline management system for the individual is so critical, because you can begin to see where different salespeople get stuck in the sales process. You've got one person that gets all the way through to presentation, and then they can never get a yes or a no. So that you have a closing problem, a asking for commitment problem. You've got another salesperson that really struggles with prospecting because there's just very little in the front end of their pipeline. Another salesperson that gets stuck in the discovery phase, right? So if you have individual pipeline for each salesperson, you can begin to coach them where they need. The interesting thing is that salespeople tend to be those that were terrible at math in college or in high school, right? We're not the smartest people. We're not the sharpest tools in the shed. But the reality is that sales is truly just data. And if you can begin to understand that really at the end of the day, regardless of what you're selling, it is a numbers game, and you can begin to figure out how the numbers work in your specific industry, in your specific business, you're in a powerful place to sit with a salesperson and not have a conversation about their conversations, to have a conversation about what the data is saying.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've talked about building a repeatable sales engine. What are the core pieces that need to be in place to have a repeatable sales engine?
I tend to reverse engineer it from the client backward to the process. And the first question that you have to ask yourself is my value proposition aligned with what the customer is actually buying? Right? Clayton Christensen, Harvard business professor, came up with this idea of jobs theory. We don't buy products or services, we hire them to do very specific jobs in our lives. And if we can untangle with our clients what jobs they're getting done by buying our products or our services, we're in a more powerful position to market and to sales to them and sell to them. And if we do it in a disciplined way, we can begin to create ICPs that are reverse engineered by the large groups of jobs that customers are trying to get done in their lives, right? So we reverse engineer the ICP based on what it is they're actually buying. So that's the foundational piece, is understanding what is our value proposition and how do we group clients by it. And then from there, it's building a sales infrastructure around it, which is to say, okay, how many stages is our sales process? How long should clients be in each stage? So we've built a pipeline system. We've then layered on top of it a CRM that is built along our pipeline. So we've customized that whole thing. But then we've taken all of those pieces and built a sales playbook. And I'm not talking about a 3-ring binder that sits on the shelf, but it is a living document that says, this is who we are, where we came from. This is how we create value for our clients. This is how we manage them through our pipeline system. And so it becomes, at this moment in time for me, they're AI-enabled engines for the sales organization, so that the salesperson can go in and tap into this AI-enabled sales playbook to build 6 or 7 different email sequences for a client to move them through the sales process.
Yeah, very good. Where do business owners usually go wrong when trying to fix inconsistent or unpredictable sales? We may realize, okay, we got a problem. My sales system is showing me we have a problem. What's usually the first kind of lame attempt to fix that problem? What do they get wrong on that, even though they recognize there's a problem?
Superman syndrome. They're the superhero, and they come in to grab it. I'll just do it.
Hold my beer. I got this. Yeah.
Exactly. Famous last words of a redneck.
Yes, exactly.
Hold my beer.
Hold my beer.
And it's a natural move. Anytime we see a problem we can fix, we think we should fix it, as opposed to sort of diagnosing what is going wrong in the specific situation for that specific salesperson with that specific client. One of the things that owners have a really difficult time doing is leading sales teams, and leading sales teams is a discipline. Is there a weekly sales meeting? Is the weekly sales meeting providing, anything more than a simple check-in? Are you educating? Are you taking specific clients and diagnosing what's going wrong in the sales process in front of the others so that they can see it, right? Are you doing one-on-ones on a weekly basis? Listen, the sales leadership is probably the most challenging arena of management that there is. Because the reality is that we're like Kirby Smart trying to coach the Georgia Bulldogs from the parking lot. We can't see the field of play. They're out on sales calls without us. And so that weekly one-on-one is this critical place where we're able to understand, we're listening not for what's said, but what is unsaid as the salesperson describes the sales call to us. What question went unasked in that call that would have enabled the sale to move forward? Are our salespeople asking for advances in Neil Rackham's terminology from spin selling, or are they settling for continuations, right? So we're coaching from the parking lot, and the one-on-one is our film room. That's where we actually get to look at the film that we didn't get to see, and that's an art. Got to be honest. I mean, just I could.
Sounds like you got some football. For some reason, I get the impression you got some football in your blood.
Well, maybe my Washington Huskies.
Yeah, that kind of gave it away.
Championship in a while.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe they were spending too much time in the parking lot, but who knows?
Yes.
How should entrepreneurs think about the relationship between marketing, sales messaging, and actual revenue generation? A lot of people will think those are all siloed. Not my problem. I'm just going to go knock on the doors. But how do you get them to think differently about how it's all tied together?
So it's interesting. I teach intro to marketing and intro to professional sales up at the University of Northern Georgia, and did the same thing at University of Washington after I finished my MBA. Here's the interesting thing that most business owners fail to understand. When you look at marketing as a discipline, sales is simply one part of promotion, right? Your advertising is promotion, your sales are promotion, your PR are promotion. So sales is not a separate part, but rather an integrated part of the whole marketing engine. And the reality is that in the B2B space, I got to guess better than 90% of business owners look at marketing, A, as a separate discipline, and B, as a waste of money. They say to themselves, I don't need to market my business. That's what I got a sales team for. We don't need to have customers find us. We go out and find customers. That's what good sales teams do, by golly. But the reality is that if you've got a salesperson that is probably spending 60% of their time prospecting, doing outreach, they are performing a marketing function in a really inefficient way. And we are at an inflection point where, I talked about the pace of change. AI is not going to help your sales efforts. It is actually making it more difficult. The amount of noise that AI is creating in the outreach phase for salespeople is enormous and is only going to get bigger. We say to ourselves, and by the way, I help clients build AI SDRs, right? A sales development rep acting as that salesperson, going out on LinkedIn and making connections on behalf of that salesperson, sending emails, sequencing them through the drip campaign. And you need to do that. But the reality is everybody's doing it.
Now it used to be only the people who were kind of savvy, who can, afford that level of sophistication and knowledge were doing it. Now mom and pop people are doing it. Scammers are probably doing it to build these fake businesses. Oh. I mean, it's like,
how many phone calls do we get a day offering us $50,000 lines of credit?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I don't need it though. I don't need it though, Sean, because a Nigerian prince is sending me money to launder in the U.S. and I get to keep half of it. It's on its way.
Of course. You see? It's on its way.
It's on its way, Sean.
And so there's this unbelief that we all have when we look at our inbox, and it just makes us more likely to build tighter spam filters and delete things before we ever read them. So it's becoming more and more difficult for a small or medium-sized business to use their sales channel as the sole means of finding new customers. And so the reality is they've got to get serious about the other pieces of their marketing plan. There's a series of McKinsey studies that showed that across 340 odd different industries, B2B and B2C, that the companies that are in the initial consideration set are 3 times more likely to close the deal than those that are added through the research phase. And we used to tend to think of the sales funnel, the marketing funnel, as being linear, but Google changed that. It became this diamond-shaped thing. We start off with a couple of businesses that we know. When we go into active demand, we add 10 or 11 new companies to it, and then we purchase from one. We may make calls to 1 or 2. Well, what's happening there is confirmation bias. I know these 2 or 3 companies, they have some level of credibility and authority with me, and I'm asking myself 2 basic questions as I go and I research these 10 or 11 other companies is I'm asking, are the companies I already know and trust giving me all that I should get from this product or service? And are they charging me a fair price? If they don't flunk those two questions, they're going to end up closing the deal. And, small, medium-sized business owner is just hoping that the big players are going to somehow fail that test. And they do from time to time. And that's great. But that's why the conversion ratio from a click from a Google AdWords campaign is so low when you look at it in terms of conversion to sales. Well, the reality is AI is changing that. The number of clicks coming from Google secularly are down 45% over the last 8 months. People are not starting their research on Google. They're starting it elsewhere. ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity. And those that do start their search on Google are often not getting past the Gemini summaries. So these two moves that sales, the small, medium-sized businesses look at for their sales, which is boatloads of outreach on the sales side, go ahead and buy some Google AdWords when things aren't happening with that. Both of them are failing at the same time. So, it's heresy. I'm a sales guy. You got to get serious about marketing and making your company world famous in its tiny little target segment so that you're one of the 2 or 3 that the customer recognizes and trusts before they get into active demand. Because again, there are a dozen different studies that tell us that about 75 to 80% of customers know who they're going to buy for before they ever make a move that indicates that they have an active amount of demand.
Yeah. For a founder who wants the business to grow beyond their own direct selling efforts, so eventually they go, okay, I gotta stop this. I got too many other things I need to do. What's the first practical step they should take? I mean, besides picking up the phone and calling Sean, obviously we want them to do that, but what can they do kind of on their own before they try and solve the entire problem? What's a good first step?
So I don't know if it is the first step, but it is the critical step. We often think about the problem in terms of knowledge transfer. The owner has this bevy of knowledge about their company, and they need to transfer that knowledge to their salespeople. I look at it not as much a knowledge transfer as much as it is a judgment transfer. Founder's magic really is in these tiny judgments that the owner is making when they're in front of a client. They are making small judgment calls around what's the value proposition in this particular situation. How do I mold our value proposition around what I'm hearing? How do I adapt the solution and the service around the problems that I've identified, right? These are all small judgments that they're making that they have not transferred and empowered their salespeople with. And so if you're a salesperson and you have no ability to alter the value proposition, if you have no ability to mold the product and service around a client, you're hamstrung to go out and create new business, because that's how new business gets created, right? Every client is listening in a different way. And if an owner has not empowered their salespeople to change the nature of the value proposition, to change the nature of the product and service based on what they're hearing, they have hamstrung them.
Yeah, completely. So you've been running strategic growth design for a couple years now. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, 2 years.
How's it going?
It's going great. I mean, listen, not without its challenges, not without, these moments where you sit and you go, okay, is anyone ever going to sign the scope of work? Should I get on LinkedIn and instead of, putting thought leadership and content out there, should I start just looking for another gig? But, ultimately what I found is that, again, it's that pulling the string. It's let me understand what these customers need in this moment, and I will wait for them. Listen, at the end of the day, we're looking for clients that have 3 things. They're looking for somebody who's open to new ideas, is dissatisfied with the current situation, and has the power to make a decision. When somebody that has the power to make a decision decides to hire me, one of 2 things has occurred. Either it is a new owner or alternately, the world and environment around them has changed so much that they can blame the environment. Because this is the fundamental challenge in sales. If I have the power to make a decision, I am by nature not dissatisfied with the situation. Because to admit that I am dissatisfied would be to admit that I'm wrong.
Right.
And so
if they can find an excuse to blame something else, then the reason we're hiring Sean isn't because I'm bad. It's because this extracurricular thing happened that I have no control over.
Yes. And all of the content that I'm pushing out, whether it's on LinkedIn or through newsletters, is helping explain to them what it is that is changing around them so that they can self-identify that, my sales have stalled, but it's not my fault. It is what's going on out in the economy, what's going out technologically, right? When I sit with a business owner and I say, how does your inbox look now versus a year and a half ago? What does your experience of LinkedIn feel like today versus 8 months ago? They all say the same thing, which is LinkedIn is just kind of a cesspool of junk. You can pick the AI pieces of content out. You can smell the in-mail that came.
They all have a tell.
Right?
They all have a tell. I hate it. I hate AI generated content. I use AI every day, but I use it to improve what I'm doing. I use it to research. All the research I have to put into you. And I host another podcast on highly technical subjects for the electronics industry, and I'm interviewing subject matter experts for stuff I don't know anything about. So it really helps me. It saves a lot of time to do the research. But I can't stand when I see, the M dashes and the stupid emojis. And I mean, it's like, okay, if you're going to let it write your content, at least clean it up so it looks like you wrote the content, right? Don't just let it go, because it's got to tell. And I just don't trust how authentic that information will be.
It is the very same paradox that we saw at the advent of Google-enabled search, which is the expectation of clients from a salesperson, what their understanding of that business and industry was, just got higher and higher and higher as we had access to understand these things. Man, I would go in and sit with a roofer back in 1988, and I could ask the dumbest questions about roofing, and they expected it, and they were fine with it, because there was no way for me to understand the roofing business
Right.
prior to going to meet with a roofer. Fast forward 15 years later, their expectation was I would walk in with a level of expertise around their industry because I did my research, I did my homework.
Yeah.
Same thing's going on with AI. If you are not enabling your sales process with AI, you are already behind, almost to an unattainable degree. At the same time, AI is not going to solve your sales problems. It's only making them worse. So as I tell clients, I say, listen, our first move is we've got to figure out how we upsell, cross-sell, and increase our share of wallet with our existing clients. That's the first move in this moment. And the second move is we've got to get serious about creating content and thought leadership that the large language models are looking for. And reality is that it's likely not to be more about the company. It's going to be more about the founder. How do we get the founder out in front of it? Because that's what resonates. People want to trust a person. They just don't trust companies anymore. So, back to the question you asked a few minutes ago, sales and marketing are the same. All of the moves that a salesperson does are marketing moves. And if you can understand that, you're in a more powerful place to begin to use other disciplines within the marketing realm to improve your sales.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, one final question. We're about out of time. And I asked this question to every guest, and most of my guests have had their companies going longer than 2 years, maybe 10 or 20 or 30 years. So this question is a little bit more relevant there, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because it'll be interesting to see the answer. How did you define success before you first started your company? And how do you define it now, a couple years in? Has it changed at all?
Yeah, I definitely would. I define success. And listen, I'm working for somebody else, and my job is, about growing revenue from anybody that I could get revenue from. And so it was a singular focus around growing revenue for the company. Now, obviously, we're doing it in such a way that it is getting success for the clients, because that money is not going to renew if I'm not putting the client's interest in front of my own. But here's the thing: is that what I do every day is, whether I'm meeting with a potential client or a referral partner, I have got to put their success in front of my own, and I've got to be patient to say, listen, if I'm not adding value in every conversation, I'm not doing my job. And it is not about my success, it's about their success. As a solopreneur, I am a success generator, not a success receiver. It is a byproduct of what I do. It is not the purpose for what I do. And that's an entirely different mindset from working for another person.
Yeah. Well, to my audience who would like to get more information on strategic growth design, Sean's company, if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, look at that podcast app, and in the show notes section, that information will be there. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's even easier. Just look down here, right down here, where it says "See More," and yep, you're pointing to it, and that will take you to the URL for Sean's company. Sean Shannon, thanks. I always enjoy talking about sales and marketing, and you've got some really good, logical, thoughtful concepts going. And I wish you continued success in this so far short journey, and may it be a long journey and fulfilling journey for you. I think what you're addressing, they say if you want to create a company, come up with a solution to a common problem, right? And I think what you're solving is a very common problem. It was my problem. It was everyone I know that started a business. It was their problem. So I think you've definitely got a fertile field of apples that are about to fall off trees, and you don't have to go hunting too far for someone with that problem. Now, convincing them that it's a problem until it really is another challenge, right? That's probably a bigger challenge, because ultimately they'll realize it. But getting them to realize it when it's quote unquote working in their world is probably a challenge. But I wish you continued success. Keep shaking the trees, and maybe in a year or two, I'll follow up with you and see how it's going.
I love it. Would love to come back. Thanks for having me on the podcast. This is one of my favorite podcasts.
Oh,
it's just such great content.
Whoa.
Yes.
Boom. There goes my head. Yeah. Thank you.
Subscribe.
Subscribe now to Sean's favorite podcast. Yes, that will work. Well, there's a good sales technique. Well, Sean, again, thanks a lot. Continued success, and I'll look forward to catching up with you in the future.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, here are some final thoughts. Many entrepreneurs begin by being the engine of their business. They make the calls, build the relationships, close the deals, solve the problems, and keep the revenue moving. That kind of personal effort is often necessary in the beginning, but it can also be a ceiling. Sean's message is an important reminder that sustainable growth requires more than energy and instinct. It requires structure. It requires clear understanding of the right customer, a repeated sales process, a healthy pipeline, and a business that does not depend entirely on the founder to create every opportunity. For founders who feel stuck, the answer may not be to work harder, chase more leads, or try another sales tactic. The answer may be to step back and ask whether the business has a sales system that others can understand, follow, and improve. Growth becomes far more powerful when it's no longer dependent on one person's heroic effort, but on a process designed to produce consistent results. Now, that's a wrap. Thanks for being part of our Reluctant Entrepreneur family. We've been exceptionally busy recording future episodes with fascinating guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a terrific guest, of course, we'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com, where you can apply or recommend a guest or just learn more about the show. And a couple of shameless plugs. I've started a new series under the Reluctant Entrepreneur brand. The new series is called Reluctant Lessons When Businesses Go Wrong. On this series, we dig into high-profile business failures and the story behind it all. So far, we've profiled numerous companies, including Rubbermaid, Kodak, Blockbuster, BlackBerry, Toys R Us, DeLorean Motor Company, and many more to come. You know, there's no shortage. Check them out on this channel. And if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. And for everyone listening or watching, if you find yourself stepping into entrepreneurship, whether by choice or by circumstance, remember this: sometimes the path we never planned becomes the journey we were meant to take. Thank you all so much for being here. I truly appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.